Well, it's another day out here at the Butt Crack Cycles compound, and both of my motorcycles are currently broken. And it's a little bit frustrating having both of your motorcycles down at one time. But that's kind of the reality of owning older Harleys, is that stuff breaks, and you, as the caretaker of this motorcycle, are responsible for fixing it. And it's not really fair to blame the bikes entirely, you know. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. So if you want to own and ride a vintage Harley, and vintage in the context of this video means pre-85, pre-Evo bikes, I'm sure somebody will come on and say, well, actually, vintage, by the definition of the Antique Collectors Motorcycle Association Club of America Limited Registered Insured, stands for the years of 1928 to 1957, or some asinine explanation, you know, someone just coming on wanting to be pedantic. But for the context of this video, we're talking about pre-85 bikes. Anyways, if you want to own one of those old Harleys, they're going to break. You're going to have to take care of them. And they're just sort of a different ownership experience than even like a 90s model bike, but certainly a very different ownership experience than like twin cams and Milwaukee 8s. So without too much more sitting around talking here at the shop, let's jump on the bike, get into the motovlog, and we're just going to talk about, you know, so you want to own a vintage Harley. Hope you all enjoy this one. So the first thing that you will notice about owning an old bike, and this bike is pretty dressed, I think, is that the control situation on it is pretty stripped down compared to newer bikes. This motorcycle has low beams, high beams, left and right turn signals, ignition on and off, and a start switch, and that's it. There is no turn signal indicators on this bike, which is pretty common on older bikes. Some of the Evo stuff, or even in these sort of years like shovelhead years, if you have like a FL, they will have a little more indication on them. But for the most part, when you get into an old bike, you really get lights, turn signals, and a speedometer. This bike has a tach though, as you'll see when we get started riding. It doesn't work right now. It doesn't bother me. I never really look at it. I honestly don't really look at the speedometer very much either. I might glance down every once in a while, but if you've been riding long enough, you generally have a pretty good idea of how fast you're going. The other thing that you'll notice is there's no gas gauge. So what I'm about to do right now, pull the cap, get your sunglasses down so you can see, and give her a little shake. Yeah, we probably got 3/4 of the tank. It's something you'll probably get used to doing, and you're probably going to run an older bike out of gas every once in a while. Just, it's really the nature of the beast. So that's where I wanted to start was, you know, hey, these just, even something that simple is different. Let's go for a ride. So we're going down the road. We're running 45 according to the speedometer, which feels about right, according to the butt meter. And you might notice, if you can see my mirrors, that they are shaking and flapping around. It's not that the mirrors themselves are loose, they're not. It's just that these older bikes vibrate a lot more than the newer stuff. Especially the little Sportsters, anything rigid mounted is going to shake so much more than the newer stuff does. And not that that's a bad thing. Personally, I like that. I will say that on this bike especially, if you are running it at if you're running it at higher speeds, like a steady 65, 70, that the vibration on it will eventually start to wear you down. I'd say more at 70 plus. My shovelhead cruises a little bit better than this bike does, than the Ironhead does. Some of that's just the nature of a Sportster versus a big twin. Sportsters are a little more playful and nimble and agile, and the
trade-off for that is that they don't cruise quite as well. But regardless, big twin or Sportster, anything that's, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old is gonna have, you know, it's gonna have some little shakes and such to it. And that's fine. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just how these older bikes are. I kind of laugh that, you know you're probably speeding when your mirrors go from, like, they're shaking, but you can still tell what's going on behind you, to they're literally just a blur. I usually don't come this way on my motovlogs. This is a fairly busy road. It's obviously a 4-lane. But I'm coming down it on purpose, just to make a point here. As we're talking about stuff shaking and vibrating and, you know, going. The speed limit's 55, so I'm going to bring us up to about 60. But 60 is, to me, a really happy spot for these older bikes. 65 is about as fast as I want to run on a 4-speed. Maybe 70 if I'm really pushing it. You can see I'm getting past. And that van who passed me actually brings up a point I wanted to make. Is that it doesn't really matter if you're riding by yourself. If you're riding by yourself, you set the pace. You ride your ride. And if your ride is 60, 65 mile an hour, that's what you ride. Because that's where your bike is happy. But, you know, I was going 60 to 55, and that van blew past me in the right lane and is now, you know, 100 yards ahead of me. If they hadn't caught that last red light, they probably would be 300 yards ahead of me. Because that's how most people drive these days. And that is, in my experience, how most people, therefore, ride newer bikes these days. If you go on a group ride with people who are mostly riding twin cams and Milwaukee 8s, and they have, you know, bigger engines with more power and 5 and 6 speeds. If you get on the interstate, these guys all want to run 80 miles an hour. I don't like to ride like that. I'll open it up sometimes in short bursts, like when I'm riding hard down a twisty back road, but I do not find it. It's just like steady.
So we're back here in my little shop. My little fuzzy wind deflector thing on the microphone flew off, and the audio quality really just went all to crap. So in the interest of getting this episode out, actually, you know, on time on Wednesday, like I've been trying to do, just decided to come back here to the shop and finish it up inside. And the point that I was trying to get to, long-winded as I might be, is that while everything that I discussed so far in this video sounds like negatives about older Harleys, they don't have as much power, they don't have as many gears, they don't have Bluetooth and GPS and cruise control and different ride modes, and, you know, even some simple things as, like, you might not even have a speedometer. But I think all of the things that those bikes don't have makes them better. You end up so much more involved in the riding experience because you have to pay a little bit more attention. You're not relying so much on technology, and you need to be a little more in tune with your motorcycle. Yes, they don't really like being turned ungodly amounts of RPM all day long, trying to run 80 or 85 down the interstate, keeping up with the newer bikes. yes, if you do that to one of them, you are going to cause yourself some problems. You'll find you'll have some more oil leaks, or you'll just need to spend a little more money on maintenance than you would have. But once you kind of get out of that style of riding, once you step back from that, and once you say, all right, I'm not on my twin cam, I'm not on my Milwaukee 8 anymore, I'm not on my bagger, I'm on something like this that's stripped down and basic, and you really like embrace what those bikes are about, I think that's where you get into what I call just like the joy of vintage Harley ownership. And every one of these bikes, each and every one of them, you might have two motorcycles that are both identical, like two 1978 FXSs, and they might be sitting right next to each other, and they're still going to each have their own unique character and their own personality. Some of that might just be the way that these were put together at the factory, you know. Maybe they were getting slapped together on an assembly line by some guy named Frank, and he had a few too many beers the night before. And a lot of it, I think, just comes down to how the bikes were owned and maintained over the years to get them to where they are now, and modified too. Very few of these motorcycles are still stock. Each and every one of them has their own individual unique character, and I think that's really fun, and it makes it so that you have to pay attention and bond with that bike. Again, that sounds a little cheesy and a little bit corny, but I do genuinely think that that's true. And I don't think you get that buying a newer Harley. You know, if you show up to your bike night, your local bike night, on any old bike, even if it's totally stock, it doesn't have to be something super customized or a chopper or a bobber, just a completely stock bike, like my Ironhead is essentially a stock motorcycle. You're going to stand out in a sea of financed baggers, road glides and street glides and blah, 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 that all look exactly the same. And if somebody else shows up on another old bike, you're probably going to find that the two of y'all have a lot in common. Some of that breaking down every once in a while, or the different quirks and the different, you know, parts of an old bike's character are just something that you can't understand unless you've actually owned one and ridden one and taken care of it. And chances are, you know, if there's an old timer there, a gray beard, he'll probably have some cool stories to swap with you back when one of these bikes was new. And I always really love hearing people's stories from when they were my age, riding these 40 and 50 and 60-year-old bikes back, you know, 40 and 50 years ago. That's something for me personally I really enjoy about owning an old bike, is just getting to speak with the older generations and just be quiet. I obviously talk a lot on this channel, but I enjoy when I don't talk and I get to just sit there and listen and nod my head and laugh and learn something. And a lot of times showing up on an old bike like the one behind me or the one we were riding earlier is a wonderful way to open that door into a conversation. So to sum all this up, do you want to own an old Harley? That's up for you to decide, but I highly recommend it. I think there's nothing else like them in the world. And yeah, they can be crotchety, and they can be finicky, and they can be kind of a pain. And they're probably going to make you cuss and throw a wrench every once in a while. And it's probably going to leave you on the side of the road. And you're going to get your hands dirty. But all of those are good things, I think. They teach you patience, and they teach you mechanical skills and troubleshooting. You'll probably have to learn some little tips and tricks and just, you know, old school ways of getting something fixed in the mud and the guts and the blood and the beer, as they say, or however that saying goes. I've never been able to keep that one straight. If you're just looking for something to get on and ride and then park in your garage and never have to worry about it, one of these bikes isn't for you. If all you want to do is just go cruise to your local bike night and do a poker run once a weekend, you know, 3 months out of the year when it's nice, sunny, warm weather, these bikes probably aren't for you. But if you're looking for an ownership experience of a motorcycle that is, in my opinion, really unique, and you're not going to find with newer stuff, and probably not even with older stuff of different brands. You know, owning an old Honda is cool, but it's not an old Harley. And I don't say that as someone who's fiercely brand loyal. I've had Hondas. There's a Honda sitting right behind this camera, actually. I've had a Kawasaki. You know, I just have found that this is the stuff that gets my heart beating,
and I get excited about. And the culture and the people that goes along with these old bikes is really something special. And I think it's because we all have that shared bond of sometimes you want to roll this thing off of a cliff. But I think they're great bikes, and if you're thinking about owning one, I say do it. Get yourself a shop manual, get yourself a decent set of tools, have some patience, and the first time it breaks down, don't give up on it, because it's a really great feeling once you kind of change your perspective and your mindset and your paradigm towards motorcycling, that it's not just about ripping the latest and greatest bike with the most amount of horsepower and the most amount of gears and all the bells and whistles 100 miles an hour down the interstate. I guess that's cool if that's what you're into. It's not what I'm into. I like to kind of enjoy the ride and the whole experience of the motorcycle together. There's nothing better to me than just winding through empty country roads all by yourself early in the morning or as the sun's going down, with an old bike humming on underneath you, and listening to all the mechanical just clattering coming together underneath you. It's like its own little symphony of mechanical simplicity. It's really a beautiful thing, and I really enjoy every second that I spend on one of these old bikes, and it makes all the time spent out here in the shop with a wrench in my hand totally worth it. So that's where we're going to wrap this episode up. Sorry if I've waxed poetic for too long. I like making these little episodes where we just kind of are sitting around and talking, or riding around and talking. I hope y'all enjoy watching them. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all on the next one. Go ride your bike.